Welcome. This is a live podcast recording, meaning that we are not going to edit the output from this. It will just go up live as a podcast. Should have it available next week. We're going to go ahead and get started. Greetings, greenhouse people, loyal listeners, and especially the folks here in the Gardens at Ball on the second day of Ball Seed Customer Days 2025. I'm your host, Bill Calkins, and this is the Tech on Demand podcast brought to you by Growertalks. If you're not a subscriber to Growertalks, I don't know what you're waiting for. It's been around for like 75 years, published every single month. In the cafe, you can pick up old copies and new copies. You can subscribe at growertalks.com or head into the cafe and fill out a form. And that reminds me to inform those of you listening to the podcast that this is being recorded live in front of a studio audience. Let's hear it from the studio audience. And this is our second day of doing this. We had part one recorded yesterday. If you didn't hear it, you're going to have to jump in the archives and check it out. But I'm your host, Bill Calkins, and my guest today is Jaime Kedrowski. Welcome, Jaime. And Jamie's the marketing manager for Ball Seed, and since taking this role, she's really elevated our B2B marketing to a whole new level, and distribution marketing tactics are her specialty. So if you have marketing questions, feel free to catch Jaime after this podcast, and I'm sure she would love to talk to anybody about the tactics she uses, right?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely.
And her job is no easy task, trust me. And I'm not going to read her bio, but we're going to jump right into the topic. But let's just say Jaime has, at least a decade of horticultural, nursery, and agricultural marketing experience. Probably more than that. Jaime's great, and I think you're going to really like a lot of the ideas that she has for us today. But I asked her to join me today for a chat about the short-term future of our industry. I'm calling it Horticulture 2.0, Rethinking the Industry. And like I said, this is part two to this topic. So here's how it's going to go. I have three, what I'm going to call big ideas. I'm going to throw them at Jaime one at a time with my own thoughts and then see what she has to say, or if she has even bigger ideas and approaches, which I'm sure she will. And this is really kind of right in her wheelhouse. So like I mentioned before part one, there are no right answers. Neither of us have a crystal ball. But what's going to come out of this are ideas for all of you to ponder and potential directions to steer as we move into this new era of horticulture. Jaime, you ready for big idea number one?
I'm ready. Thanks for having me, Bill.
Absolutely. Big idea number one. I'm going to call it culture versus horticulture. How do we make our industry more relevant to today's consumer? I look at it as millennials are now making up our key customer demographic. And millennial, I'll just say, are in their 30s and 40s, frequently buying first or second homes, having kids, starting families, doing what 30 and 40-year-olds do, in a goal to make our industry more relevant to this customer base. We did a great job with the baby boomers. Gen X, I'm a Gen Xer, but we're kind of a small generation, so millennials really is the sweet spot. I'm going to throw out an idea that we need to talk about plants in terms of time savings. So you can actually plant a garden, whether you're picking annuals or perennials, relatively quickly. It's not a huge investment in time. You might have seen your mom or grandma working days and days and hours in the garden. That is not necessary these days with some of the plants and some of the strategies. So I'm going to say, let's talk about the fact that you actually can garden without spending way too much time. Jaime, any ideas?
I think that is a very true statement, Bill. Absolutely. You can garden without spending a lot of time. Specifically related to the millennial generation, I think one thing we all know about the millennial category and the millennial age group is that they really love to innovate. They like to think outside of the box, dare I say, break the rules when they can and when it's appropriate. So I think that concept of being able to garden with less time, less resources is very true. That's a trending kind of activity that we're seeing within the gardening and retail consumer sector right now that I think will continue to grow. I also think it taps into that innovation piece. You know, the standard cut and dry way of doing things in the garden is not necessarily what the millennial generation or the next generation, Gen Z, is looking for. So I absolutely think that's applicable.
That's true. And how important do you think it is to start thinking about Gen Z as an emerging customer base?
Yeah, it's that fine line that we're all walking, right? And I think what we all know and what we see in the Gen Z age group is that they're very digitally present. And when you're digitally present, there's very quick turnover for content, very quick turnover for conversation. And I also think that it amplifies the opportunities for engagement. And so I think Gen Z is already making themselves very present, very known in what they like and what, they respond to. And so I would say as early as this afternoon is a great way to engage Gen Z. They're probably on their social media channels now talking about what they like. And so to meet them halfway with what we're interested in and kind of sharing those thoughts and ideas is a great way to get started.
That's cool. And as I think about it, we have so many generations shopping at garden centers right now. Baby boomers are still buying a ton of plants. You got Gen X, you have millennials, you have Gen Z, and probably some Gen Alpha already buying plants. I have a 15-year-old daughter whose room is full of plants. So I do know that, and one of the rules of marketing is you aim for a target audience, but you're going to hit all of those concentric rings around it. Another idea I had for millennials, Z, and Alpha is to talk about plants in terms of what they do. So plants can be a form of relaxation. And in today's sort of high anxiety society, I think plants are a great low stress option. If you're a young parent, maybe you're gardening to provide a low stress place for your kids to hang out. So I do think talking about the secondary benefits of plants, yeah, they're pretty, but what do they do?
Absolutely. I think we're seeing that across the board. All generations, all types of buyers, consumers, how they're interacting with plants. It speaks to that sort of customization piece of gardening and interacting with different plant material, where if you're interested in pollinators, we know that trend is heavy now, and you want to have a custom or curated gardening experience to the pollinators that you like the most. Maybe that's hummingbirds. Maybe you don't care so much for bees or wasps. You're able to have that curated for you. And I think that speaks volumes to the customization piece that we're seeing across the board of all generations.
And I promise you, Jamie not discuss this ahead of time, but this is a perfect segue into big idea number 2, which are new plants versus new solutions. We talk a lot about new varieties. I mean, we're sitting in a garden surrounded by thousands of plants, hundreds of new varieties, and hopefully everyone's gotten a chance to go out and check them out. But I think products today need to be more than pretty. They need to solve problems, offer these multiple benefits. And Jamie already mentioned pollinators. That is a huge opportunity for folks to customize their gardens and curate their gardens. And I was thinking maybe the whole drought tolerant or water wise might be a good trend or a good hook as well for newer consumers coming in, is talk about maybe the benefits of the plants. And I was thinking a garden center could very easily do a social media post every month about a new benefit of plants. Call out specific varieties. Maybe it's the ones you're long on and need to sell. Maybe it's the new cool ones in your store. But having a customized approach, I think, is important. What other ideas do you have for new solutions, Jamie?
Sure. So being in the millennial category, thinking outside the box, being innovative. So on the pollinator trend, it's heavy right now. I think that we should lean hard into the pollinator options. But I also think there's a gap there where we can educate on pollinators themselves. So maybe you historically love hummingbirds, but maybe, you want to learn more about creatures or critters within your territory that also help on the pollination impact. And so I think garden centers, retailers can really, even landscapers can educate on pollinators and maybe open up kind of an opportunity where if someone, has a liking towards hummingbirds, but they are educated on, let's say, wasps, that piques their interest. All of a sudden, now there's a whole new portfolio of plants that now they're engaged with, they're interested in buying, and there's a function behind that. So I think thinking outside the box a little bit of, hey, yes, these plants are good for pollinators, but also we can educate you on the pollinators as well and sort of go further with that impact on how we're speaking and interacting with the different consumers.
I think that's great. And the education, I want to dig into that a little bit because, sure. I don't know, I've been talking to garden centers for 20 years. And for a long time, we talked about classes in the garden center. 30, 45-minute classes, Saturday mornings. Sometimes you charge for them. Sometimes you offer them for free. And I do still think there's a place for that. But perhaps now the way to engage is digitally and quicker. Any thoughts? I feel like you could do TikToks or YouTube shorts on specific pollinators.
I like that idea. I love that idea, actually. And I think your other idea of the social media campaign around different functions, too, is brilliant. And the reason is because, those are high impact moments where if a consumer is on the fence about going to the garden center or engaging with a new plant that they haven't tried, that is a really quick high impact moment where that could influence them to then go and buy or make the decision to try something new. So I think all the different opportunities for engagement, whether digital or signage within the store, should be capitalized on, because you never know when that quick moment or interaction is going to influence someone to make that decision.
And I do think we sometimes underestimate the fear factor. Like,
Yes.
people are afraid to try new plants and to even dip their toes into gardening. And that's something I think as an industry, it's on us to reduce that barrier. And it's really on us to explain how easy it can be. When I to friends who are buying a home, starting to garden, I just say, well, get a dragon wing or a whopper or something. Like, you can't fail with those kind of plants. But I also think if you can then weave in this pollinator idea, kind of a no-brainer pollinator plant, maybe some of these Angelonia or things like that, you're really going to have an opportunity to catch people and get them excited. Any other thoughts on new solutions?
Yeah, I think kind of weaving in that same kind of hitting all generations theme, exploring ways to provide unique feedback loops is really impactful to all generations. So, whether that is digitally, whether that's gathering feedback in a unique way within the garden center, sample boxes, hey, try this free plant. If you like it, come back. You get a discount on that plant later during the season. Unique things that kind of call attention to those feedback loops, giving a space or a platform for your consumers to give you their ideas. I think that would be one kind of unique piece of advice that I would give. Yep.
And I think digitally now makes it so easy to do an exit survey. Like, your customers are going to be thrilled to provide ideas to you, especially if you give them a free plant.
Yes.
And it's a quick way to collect, like, maybe it's, where else do you shop? Get some ideas of where else they're buying things for their lives, and then go check out those places, whether it's an online platform or a brick and mortar store. Where else are they spending their money, and how can I kind of, replicate or steal ideas from that retailer? I think we don't need to learn from ourselves. We need to learn from the other places where folks are spending their disposable income.
Bill, wanted to jump in real quick. It's humorous because, like you said, we did not prep any of this beforehand. But on that note, I was thinking about kind of this unique, retail aspect that we don't really hear about, but that kind of happened during COVID, which is we have our introverts and our extrovert shoppers. And there's this concept of, if you pick up, let's say your brand colors are red and green, like Ball Seed, maybe you have a red basket and a green basket. And if your consumer picks up the red basket, that means, hey, I'm kind of looking on my own. I know what I'm looking for. I don't necessarily want to be approached for questions. I want to just kind of peruse and browse and pick out what, I have in my mind. And maybe the green basket is, hey, please approach me. I'm not super educated on what I'm looking for and I need the help. So that's a unique way to kind of target, like you said, those different audiences, but still have an overlap on how you can serve them.
That's a brilliant idea. And I worked retail garden center for many years, and it's very clear when you approach someone who doesn't want to be approached.
Yes.
I mean, and that gets kind of awkward. Like, hey, can I help you? And they're like, no, you absolutely cannot help me. And you're like, oh, okay, and then your boss is looking at you like, why aren't you engaging with them? And you're like, So, no, I think that's a really cool idea. I've definitely never heard that one before. Third big idea. I think that this is the one that I think the most about. It's sort of an idea I've been pitching to people lately. And I'll be honest, a few people I've mentioned it to, even this week, have thought I was kind of crazy. But I'll throw this out and see what you guys think, see what Jamie thinks. Is that I would say for at least the last 15 years, we've been talking about gardening as a lifestyle. We're selling a lifestyle. And I do think that resonated for a while. But I'm starting to get the sense that with a new and emerging customer base, we're kind of going back to hobbies. And I'm a person with a lot of hobbies. I love hobbies. I get kind of weirded out when someone doesn't have a hobby. But, and I'm not saying like my grandma collected owls. That was like her hobby. I think it's more like it's a way to customize things for yourself and to go deep into a topic And now we have we can learn about any topic at our fingertips all day long. So I think that we're moving back toward hobbies with what I would consider younger generations today, younger than me. I'm turning 50 next year. But I wonder how we can pivot the messaging to talk a little bit more about gardening as a hobby. And really hit me that we've talked for the last few years about plant collectors. People who are buying house plants, like immersing themselves in this monstera or, a specific house plant, learning everything about it, spending a lot of money on one or two specimen plants. But now I get the sense that these folks are now buying homes, buying second homes, moving this hobby outside. So I'm thinking that maybe it's a matter of curating collections within a garden center so that, maybe this person's super excited about dahlias, dark leaf dahlias, which are, a huge trend in horticulture right now, certainly from the breeding side, but I think that's being driven by consumers. So what do you think about hobbies coming back?
So I completely agree with you, Bill. I think that hobbies are absolutely coming back. The age of information, we have access to all these tools and resources. You can tap into, be dedicated to 10 plus hobbies in your lifetime, probably even more. And I think that's what, from my experience, what I'm noticing is that, maybe historically hobbies where you had one or two, you were dedicated to them for large chunks of your life. And now I think what we're seeing is that people can tap into these different hobbies as they kind of please and as it fits into their lifestyle at that time. If you're traveling a lot, maybe you ease up on your hobbies. If you have more downtime, maybe you're leaning into more hobbies. So I think being in tune and having a pulse on the different hobbies that people can be involved in and interested in is going to help you on the retail side. The reason I say that is because plants can be integrated in all sorts of ways. So the collection piece, I think, is extremely relevant, especially with our access to different genetics, different colors on the market. You have more collector's items in the plant category now than ever. And I think to add to that, on the hobby side of things, people having multiple hobbies, connect the dots for your consumers and people who are coming into your stores on, hey, if you're interested in music and live events, here's how you can incorporate plants into this way. One unique example that I've heard this year with the launch of the Firefly petunias, those glow-in-the-dark petunias, is incorporate that into yoga sessions, incorporate that into sound healing or music events, where now you have kind of this glow-in-the-dark element, but it's also still natural and kind of related to that, more earthy feel that people, want to have in today's, kind of time. So very relevant to be in tune with hobbies and what people are interested in.
I like that idea of connecting the dots. And one way it strikes me that you could do that is ask your employees that fall into the millennial or Gen Z or alpha demographics. Like, ask them what their hobbies are. Ask them what their friends' hobbies are. Get like a list and then see how you can fit plants into those hobbies. That's really, really cool. And I think a hobby could even be a deep dive into propagation or starting your own plants. I think that is a trend right now, and people like to when they start with a hobby, they want to go deep into it. They want to know the ins and outs of it, how it began, the history of it. And our industry has a ton of history. We have a ton of different ways you can engage, from propagation all the way up through pruning and trimming and things that people can kind of nerd out on as a hobby. Any other thoughts about this, Jamie?
I love the phrase nerd out. I think now more than ever, we're accepting different, quirks and unique activities and different things that people like. And so I think plants have a space here for that, for people who do want to nerd out. They want to learn. It's a continuous education opportunity. And so I think that's really going to drive a lot of trends and a lot of interest in the coming years. Absolutely.
Cool. Now, how about this? I don't even have this on our list of questions, but thinking about some of the flowers that I've seen out here in the gardens, like a curated collection could be tropical plants. And tropical plants could really cover a huge range of different flowers and plants we see out here. But I'm looking out at some of the cannas, and I feel like if you could create a tropical trend for your customers, and that, to me, a lot of that comes down to just repeating it over and over. Like, tropicals are cool, tropicals are trendy, big tropicals, big plants. And then in your store, it might mean double merchandising, it might mean displaying them in two different places, but pushing people toward the trends that fit the plants, I don't know. I feel like that could work. What are some other collections that you can think of? Like,
Yeah, absolutely. I like that term curated as well, catered or designed by us for you. For those of you on the landscape side of the chain, thinking about that from a design perspective too, how many of your homeowners also are interested in to fish and aquarium setups? That's a real life example of them altering an environment to their liking, what they like, the colors, the designs. How can you kind of bring that out and mimic that in the landscape to appeal to more customers within that space? I've been kind of joking around. Our designer here in the gardens, Landon, has a bed up at the front by the cafe. It's called the Arid Oasis, but it reminds me of an aquarium, a fish tank setup that I really liked growing up. And so, landscapers, how do you kind of present that in a way where it is curated, it is custom to the, homeowner's interests, and present it in a way that kind of makes them feel connected with their indoor interests to their outdoor interests and that design element. So I think that's another, fun way to kind of think about that too.
that's a good idea. And there's you can make that easy by pulling the plants to that display or to that vignette within your garden center, and just to open people's eyes to even more opportunities. They might think of a handful of plants to put in that arid oasis in their yard, but you probably have like 10 or 15 more plants that could fit right into that. So I like that. And then show them how to do it. I think that's a really, really good idea. Well, as we wrap up, it is 11:30. The lunch tent is opening. Everybody loves the lunch at Ball Seed Customer Days. We were looking at some magazines from the 60s where they fed 4,000 people in an hour and a half at a Ball Seed Customer Day. We don't have that many people, and I think the catering crew is a lot more effective this year. So we don't want to let you miss lunch. But, Jamie, as we wrap up, do you have any other thoughts about just horticulture in the next 3 to 5 years, what folks should be thinking about as we look at a new customer base, as we start to shift? Jim mentioned, you can't do the same thing over and over. We all need to be profitable. We need to be exciting. Any final thoughts on creating excitement?
Sure. I think one way to keep away from stagnation in the industry is to kind of always keep expression and an open dialogue at the forefront of your thinking. The younger generations want to be expressive. They're finding outlets and channels to do just that. And I think that plants, with all of the possibilities in the varieties, the colors, and the application that we can share with them, I think that's a great way to keep things moving forward, keep things fresh, and to experiment. I think that is a huge thing that we're seeing as well. Is don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to get a little weird with the things that you're putting together or the ideas that you're putting out there. Give things time to fail as well. We often, will launch something. If it doesn't have a great response right away, we might shy away from continuing that. But we need to give some time for things to succeed or fail. And I think that's a great piece of advice going forward in horticulture as we kind of tread new waters.
Awesome. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for your time on one of your busiest days of the year out here in the sun all day. Thank you to everybody who comes to Customer Day every year. We're going to keep doing it. You guys are going to keep coming, and the new breeding is going to keep bringing new awesome plants to market. And Jamie, thanks for sitting down today.
Thanks so much, Bill. Had a great time.
I'm your host, Bill Calkins, and if you like this installment, be sure to subscribe to the Tech On Demand podcast on your favorite app. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, just about all the others, and you will find more than 180 episodes covering a wide range of professional greenhouse topics. So until next time, take care out there.